Greetings, Neo-Swedenborgians. I'm going to read today from Francesco. I'm reading off my phone, but I'll link this copy in the description. Chapter 2. Francesco says, "Dead, dead," I wildly cried. "Oh no, surely no, for the dead feel nothing more. They turn to dust, they molder to decay, and all is gone. All is lost to them. They have no more consciousness of anything, unless, indeed, my boasted philosophy of life has been wrong all along, all false, and the soul of the dead still lives, even though the body decays. The priests of my own church had taught me so, but I had scorned them as fools, blind and knavish, who, for their own ends, taught that men lived again and could only get to heaven through a gate of which they held the keys, keys that turned only for gold and the bidding of those who were paid to say masses for the departed soul, priests who made dupes of silly, frightened women and weak-minded men, who, yielding to the terror inspired by their awful tales of hell and purgatory, gave themselves bodies and souls to purchase the elusive privilege they promised. I would have none of them. My knowledge of these priests and the inner hidden lives of many of them had been too great for me to listen to their idle tales, their empty promises of pardon that they could not give, and I said I would face death when it came with the courage of those who know only that for them it must mean total extinction. For if these priests were wrong, who was right? Who could tell us anything of the future, or if there were any God at all? Not the living, for they but theorize and guess, and not the dead, for none came back from them to tell. And now I stood beside this grave, my own grave, and heard my beloved call me dead and strew flowers upon it. As I looked, the solid mound grew transparent before my eyes, and I saw down to the coffin with my own name and date of my death on it, and through the coffin I saw the white still form I knew as myself lying within. I saw to my horror that the body had already begun to decay and become a loathsome thing to look upon. Its beauty was gone, its features soon none would recognize, and I stood there, conscious, looking down upon it and then at myself. I felt each limb, traced out with my hands each familiar feature of my face, and knew I was dead and yet I lived. If this were death, then those priests must have been right after all. The dead lived, but where? In what state? Was this darkness hell? For me, they would have found no other place. I was so lost, so beyond the pale of their church, that for me they would not have found a place even in purgatory. I had cast off all ties to their church. I had so scorned it, deeming that a church which knew of and yet tolerated the shameful and ambitious lives of many of its most honored dignitaries had no claim to call itself a spiritual guide for anyone. There were good men in the church, true, but there was also this mass of shameless evil ones, whose lives were common talk, common matter of ridicule, yet the church that claimed to be the example to all men and to hold all truth did not cast out these men of disgraceful lives. No, she advanced them to yet higher positions of honor. None who have lived in my native land and seen the terrible abuses of power in her church will wonder that a nation should rise and seek to cast off such a yoke. Those who can recall the social and political condition of Italy in the earlier half of this century, and the part the Church of Rome played in helping the oppressor to rivet the fetters with which she was bound, and who know how her domestic life was honeycombed with spies, priests as well as laymen, till a man feared to whisper his true sentiments to his nearest and dearest, lest she should betray him to the priests and he again to the government, how the dungeons were crowded with unhappy men, yea, even with mere lads guilty of no crime save a love of their native land and hatred of its oppressors. Those, I say, who know all this will not wonder at the fierce indignation and burning passion which smoldered in the breast of Italia's sons, and burst at last into a conflagration which consumed man's faith in God and his so-called vicar upon earth, and like a mountain torrent that has burst its bounds, swept away men's hopes of immortality, if only through submission to the decrees of the Church it was to be obtained. Such then had been my attitude of revolt and scorn towards the Church in which I had been baptized, and that Church could have no place within her pale for me. If her anathemas could send a soul to hell, surely I must be there. And yet, as I thought thus, I looked again upon my beloved, and I thought she could never have come to hell even to look for me. She seemed immortal enough, and if she knelt by my grave, surely I must still be on earth. Did the dead then never leave the earth at all, but hover near the scenes of their earthly lives? With such and many similar thoughts crowding through my brain, I strove to get nearer to her I so loved, but found I could not. An invisible barrier seemed to surround her and keep me back. So I'll link this in the description, but I'll also link Spirit Intercourse by J. Hewitt Mackenzie, and I'll link the Wikipedia to the Van Allen belts, because the case I am making here is that the map in the J. Hewitt Mackenzie book is the same world that this Francesco is describing. And so within this world there are different levels, and there are the 7 heavens, which is heaven 1, 2, and 3 are the inner Van Allen belt, and heaven 4, 5, 6, and 7 are the outer Van Allen belt. And according to J. Hewitt Mackenzie, if you live a good life on earth, you end up in the inner Van Allen belt. But then this is something different altogether. This is an earthbound spirit. So for the beginning of Francesco's book, he is earthbound. So he is on the surface of the earth as a spirit. And then as he strives to better himself and to understand his situation more, he learns how he can progress upwards, and he ends up by the end of the book he's in Summerland. He's on the 3rd level, and his parents talk about being on the 4th level. His parents talk about, they say, now that you're on the 3rd level, we can come visit you more because we live on the 4th level. And so all these books I refer to, there's a consistency of descriptions of the maps and the places they go. So there's 4 books. There's this one, Francesco, Wanderer in the Spirit Lands, which I recommend reading this one first. There's also J. Hewitt Mackenzie Spirit Intercourse, which I'll link below, and recommend starting on page 196. That has an overview, it has a map, it has general descriptions. Then there's the one I read in the previous episode, which is Intramuros by Rebecca Springer. Her place that she describes is religiously specific. And if you look at the map that J. Hewitt Mackenzie has, the religiously specific areas are on the 2nd and 3rd spheres. And then as you move up, you get to a more general area where the religious divisions fade away and you become one big family. And then the 4th book is Life in the World Unseen and More Life in the World Unseen by Monsignor Hugh Benson. And so I'll say that 3 of the 4 books present a non-religious afterlife. Monsignor Hugh Benson was a priest, and in his life as a priest he wrote against trying to communicate with the spirit world. And then when he gets to the spirit world, he regrets that, so he comes back and dictates this book. I guess I'll see if I can find a copy of that, a PDF, and I'll link that too. And so the only one of these books which is religiously specific is Intramuros, Rebecca Springer. And as I've said, that presents within this map, one of the lower levels. But though it presents one of the lower levels, it is extraordinarily beautiful. The sun shines, the trees produce the most delicious and varied fruit. She swims, she sunbathes, there's music, there's all her relatives. So these places are really unimaginably beautiful. I guess that's enough for today. Thanks. See ya. Bye.